Hi, this is Kevin and Joe McGonigal. We're back with another trip in the car. Got my chauffeur with me here today. We wanted to touch on another year-end or beginning of the year topic. By the time you see this, it might be January, and you might be starting to think about some changes you want to make in your business. If you're also in the middle of transition planning, some of those changes could have possibly a negative impact on that process. So we wanted to touch on that today. Joe, do you have 2 or 3 things that maybe are standard changes you would make in a business, or at least look to evaluate, that could have a negative impact on your transition?
Yeah, I think there's one certainly big one that it seems like a lot of doctors, transition ready or not, are considering, which is if you are in network with PPOs, we're hearing a lot of practice owners are frustrated oftentimes with PPO reimbursement rates, its impact on patient care, and certainly its impact on a practice's margins more specifically. And so, we work with clients and say, listen, I'm going to be getting rid of ABC insurance company, or I'm getting out of network with all insurances. And that could be a great thing for a practice, certainly, if it's done strategically and well planned. However, if you are within 12 months of a possible transaction, I don't want to say specific or very definitively that I wouldn't do it, but I would be a little careful, because any buyer or buyer advisor or lender is going to look at a 3-year historical look at a practice. And so your practice collected $1 million 3 years ago, $1 million 2 years ago, and $1 million in 2024. And then we tell a buyer, and by the way, the seller got out of 3 insurance networks in September of this year. Most buyers and banks and buyer advisors are going to say, well, wait a minute. I mean, we have no idea what that's going to mean in terms of the revenue for the business. I guess things could go up. Ideally things at least stay the same, but there could be patient attrition. There could be a negative impact to the revenue of the practice, at least in the short term. And I can tell you that buyers generally assume the worst, right? They assume it's going to go down.
I think what you're describing there is, what a lot of buyers and their advisors are looking for. Number one, to mitigate risk and predictability.
Yes.
Right? So this whole process kind of relies on a buyer's ability to recreate what you did from a production and dentistry standpoint to an expenses standpoint. They want your math to also be their math, to feel good about moving forward and making this transition. So I think that's probably one of the main concerns that a change like that can have, is it increases the risk and throws off the predictability of the practice.
100%. So we're advocates of changing payer mix in a business if it makes sense and it's done strategically. That said, if you're close to a transition or a practice sale, I would really strongly recommend having deeper conversations with your advisors around the potential impact of doing it.
Sure. I think one other thing that maybe falls into this bucket would be staff salaries and increases. We know year-end business owners like to reward their team. We're all for that as well. I think it's just an area that can get away from you if you routinely give a 5% raise every year, even if that doesn't necessarily match the practice growth that you've seen in that year. So that's just an important category to pay attention to and make sure it's mirroring the performance of the practice.
Well, I think the other piece there, coming out of COVID, Kev, obviously a lot of practices, experienced lower profitability or, lower production. It was obviously a bumpy ride coming out of COVID. And I think a fair amount of practice owners paused or dialed back on the frequency
trying to play catch up.
Exactly. They dialed back the frequency of raises or increases. And so now, we're 4 or 5 years removed from that. I do feel like some owners either playing catch up and or when they get close to a transaction, they feel like, the staff's been with me, they've been so great, I'm going to give them an extra bump this year. I normally bump them X%. This year I'm going to do twice that. I'm going to give them something bigger. Well, again, keep in mind, to your point earlier about predictability and repeatability, if you give staff a big bump heading into a sale, that could throw off the financial modeling if everything was based on the old salaries, and now buyer's going to factor in heavier staff expense.
You might end up paying for it twice.
Yeah, in valuation. So, I think the moral of the video is you own a business, you run a business. At times, change is required to run it more efficiently and more profitably. We're all for that. But as you head towards a transaction, the critical thing is think about, I guess, downstream impact, and try to
Consistency.
alleviate any unintended consequences of an otherwise strategic business decision.
Okay. All right. Well, we're out of time for today, but we'll be back soon with another video, and we hope you'll join us. Thanks. This is Kevin and Joe, TDS Match.